Young in the Restless. Spoilers. Fridays, January 3, 2006. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of the Winters' home as Dominic sat in his usual spot by the window, staring out at the yard. He was alone, his small hands pressed against the cold glass, watching the world go by. The soft murmur of the house round him was a stark contrast to the turmoil building in his chest. He missed his precious real parents, Devon and Abby. Where were they? Why hadn't they come to find him? Where was Mariah? For a moment, a thought flickered in his young mind. Was this some sort of game? Was he playing hide and seek, and Mariah was just waiting for him to find her? He had played the game many times before, with his mom and dad hiding and calling for him to come and find them. But now it was different. No one was coming to find him. He was alone. Mariah watched him from the doorway, her heart heavy with guilt. She could see the confusion and sadness in Dominic's eyes, and every instinct in her screamed to tell him the truth, to let him go home to his parents, to let him have the life he deserved. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not after everything that had happened. Not when the darkness was still lingering, whispering in her ear, urging her to hold on. She stepped forward slowly, her hands shaking as she reached out for him. "Dominic," she said softly, her voice trying to sound calm, though inside she was anything but. "Do you want to play a game?" Dominic looked up, his face clouded with confusion. "A game? What kind of game?" "A game where you hide, and I'll find you," Mariah said, the lie tasting bitter in her mouth. "You can hide here, and I'll search for you, just like we always do. Would you like that?" Dominic nodded hesitantly, his small hands gripping the edge of the window. "Okay, but I don't want to stay here forever. I want to go home." Mariah's heart clenched as she turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "Home will come soon," she muttered, though she knew in her heart that it might never be that simple. Meanwhile, across town, Devon and Abby were already in a state of panic. The house was eerily quiet, the absence of Dominic a void that no amount of searching could fill. Abby had been calling his name repeatedly, her voice frantic as she moved through each room, hoping beyond hope that he was hiding somewhere, playing one of his little games. But the house was silent, and there was no sign of him. "Devon," Abby's voice broke through the tension in the air. "He's not here. Dominic's gone. Where is he?" Devon stood at the door, his face pale as he checked the locks again, his thoughts racing. How did this happen? "We were right here. We were just—" I know, Abby cried, her voice rising in desperation. "I don't understand. Where is he?" The sound of Abby's phone ringing broke through the chaos. She grabbed it quickly, her hand shaking as she answered. "Hello," she gasped, her breath catching in her throat. A distorted voice on the other end of the line sent a chill down her spine. "Abby, Devon, your son is gone. Mariah Copeland took him. She's hiding him from you." Abby's hand trembled as she held the phone to her ear. "What? No, that's not possible. Mariah wouldn't. Why would she do that?" The voice on the phone was cold, almost mocking. "She thinks she's protecting him. She's made her choice, and now you'll never get him back." Abby collapsed against the wall, the words sinking in. No, this can't be happening." Her voice broke as she looked at Devon, whose expression was just as stricken. The reality of the situation hit them both like a ton of bricks. Mariah, the woman they had trusted, the woman who had once been part of their family, had taken their son. Devon stood motionless, disbelief written across his face. "We need to find him. We need to find him now." Later that evening, at Crimson Lights, Victoria Newman sat at a corner table, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. She had been working tirelessly, trying to salvage her family's legacy after the financial devastation they had endured. But nothing seemed to work. Her father had been so secretive, so closed off, leaving her in the dark about the future of Newman Enterprises. His lack of communication had left her feeling like an outsider in her own family. Victoria had barely taken a sip of her coffee when she saw Nate Hastings walk through the door. He spotted her immediately and made his way over, his smile warm, tinged with concern. "Victoria, it's good to see you," Nate said, pulling out the chair across from her. I didn't expect to run into you here. Victoria managed a weak smile, but there was a clear tension in her posture. I didn't expect to be here, honestly. Everything's falling apart, Nate. I don't even know where to begin. Nate's expression softened, the concern in his eyes deepening. You're not alone in this. You know, he said gently, you don't have to face all of this by yourself. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. You think I don't know that? My father's been running this company into the ground for years, and he won't even tell me what's going on. I have no idea what his plan is, but I know it's something that he's hiding from me. Something dangerous. She paused, her voice rising. And now he expects me to just sit back and trust him. Nate listened patiently, understanding the frustration in her voice. You know your father. He's always had his reasons for keeping things to himself. Victoria slammed her hand on the table, her frustration boiling over. I don't want to be kept in the dark anymore, Nate. I want to take control of my own future. I want to make my own decisions. Nate leaned forward slightly, a small chuckle escaping his lips. I remember this side of you, he said, his voice light. Your determination, your strength. Victoria gave him a wry smile. I think my father needs to see that side of me more often. Maybe it's time I stop waiting for his approval and start making my own moves. Nate raised an eyebrow. You really want to do this by yourself? You know your dad needs you. Even if he's not saying it, he still relies on you. Victoria hesitated before answering, her voice softening. Maybe, but if he's hiding something from me, I can't keep waiting for him to open up. I have to figure it out on my own. Nate reached out and touched her hand, a supportive gesture that caught her off guard. You're not alone, Victoria. You've got me, and I'll be there for you, no matter what you decide. Victoria met his gaze, a sense of calm washing over her. Thanks, Nate. I appreciate that. At Society, Sally Spectre sat at a corner table with Audra Charles, the tension in the air palpable as they discussed business. Sally was a woman of ambition, and lately, her mind had been consumed with the new changes at Abbott Communications. She had been keeping a close eye on Billy Abbott, and now that he had agreed to Kane Ashby's proposal, it was time to act. Audra, Billy has accepted Kane's offer. Sally began, her voice steady. But don't worry, Abbott Communications is still solid. We're not going anywhere. Audra nodded, her curiosity piqued. What's your plan, Sally? Sally leaned forward, her gaze sharp. I want you to be my number two. I need someone I can trust to handle the day-to-day while I take care of the bigger picture. You've got the skills, and I know you want to prove yourself. This is your chance. Audra considered Sally's offer for a moment, then nodded. I'm in. Let's do this. Sally smiled, satisfied with her decision. Good. As for Jill's reaction, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. As the evening wore on, Sally couldn't help but feel the weight of the decisions she had made. But she was driven. She was going to ensure that Abbott Communications stayed on top, no matter the cost. Back at the Winters' home, the night had fallen into a deep silence. Devin and Abby were exhausted from their search, but still, there was no sign of Dominic. The emptiness of the house was suffocating. They couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, about the woman they had trusted, and the son they had lost. And somewhere in the darkness, Mariah sat alone with Dominic, her own heart torn between love and guilt. She had made her choice, but she didn't know if she could live with the consequences. As the night dragged on, the tension continued to rise. No one knew where this would end. But one thing was certain: things would never be the same again. Audra leaned back in her chair, the corners of her lips lifting in a brief smile of appreciation. Thank you for this, she said, her voice warm yet laced with a thread of uncertainty. She had always been a fighter, but Sally's unwavering support gave her a sense of stability she hadn't felt in a long time. Still, there was one thing weighing heavily on her mind. But, she added carefully, what happens if Jill Abbott threatens to cut the budget? You know, with everything that's going on with her and Billy. Her eyes searched Sally's face, looking for reassurance. Sally's expression hardened slightly, but her resolve was clear. I won't back down, she answered, her tone firm. You've always had my back, Audra, and now I'm going to have yours. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing as she thought of the many battles she had fought in the business world. Jill Abbott wasn't about to scare her off. Audra's shoulders relaxed, and she smiled, the tension in her chest easing slightly. I appreciate that more than you know. Honestly, I've been so hard on myself lately, trying to figure out how to make everything work. I didn't expect to feel so uncertain. She looked down at her hands, the weight of the world seeming to hang on her every decision. Before Sally could respond, the door to society opened, and in walked Nate Hastings, accompanied by none other than Victoria Newman. Their presence shifted the dynamic of the room immediately. Victoria's sharp eyes swept over the scene, pausing only briefly as she caught sight of Audra and Sally. Is everything okay, Nate? Victoria asked, her tone carefully neutral, as if she were already preparing herself for a change of plans. We could go somewhere else if you'd like. But Nate, ever the calming influence, shook his head and smiled reassuringly. No, let's resolve this matter now, he said, a glint of determination in his voice. We're all here, so let's talk. Victoria nodded, a slight tension in her posture as she adjusted her focus to the two women at the table. Well then, let's get to it, she added, her voice colder than it had been moments before. Nate led them to the table, where Audra and Sally were sitting. He greeted them with a polite but subdued hello, ladies. Audra's lips curled into a tight frown as she glanced at him, her discomfort palpable in the air between them. Sally, ever the social architect, broke the ice. Victoria, it's good to see you. How's the family? Any new developments on your end? Her tone was professional, but there was an underlying curiosity that hinted at deeper questions. Victoria glanced at Sally, her gaze cool, before replying with a sharp edge. It's been complicated. My father is pushing forward with some plans, but I don't have all the details. It's as if he doesn't trust me to handle things the way he would want. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms defensively. And I know Billy Abbott is out there somewhere, making sure he paints me as the villain in all of this. Sally's eyebrows raised in slight surprise. Billy Abbott, she asked, a flicker of amusement crossing her face. I thought he was no longer part of the Abbott communications team. Victoria scoffed, the edge in her voice sharpening. Exactly. Billy probably thinks he'll take over as finance minister, but he's dreaming. It's only a matter of time before he messes it up, like he always does. Nate, who had been quietly listening, glanced over at Victoria. So, you believe that Billy's days at Abbott Communications are numbered? He asked, trying to guide the conversation back to a more constructive place. Victoria didn't hesitate. Absolutely, she responded confidently. He's not going to hold that position for long, not while he's making so many enemies. She paused, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the other two women. But enough about him. Let's talk about the bigger picture. As Victoria and Nate moved toward their own table, the conversation turned to lighter matters. Victoria was clearly not interested in discussing her personal issues any further, and Nate, with his usual charm, followed her lead, steering the conversation back to the business at hand. But even as they spoke of other matters, the tension between Victoria and her family was undeniable. Meanwhile, Mariah was struggling to keep her composure. She had taken Dominic to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, away from the watchful eyes of anyone who might try to interfere. As she led him through the dingy, dimly lit hallway, Dominic's confusion only grew. He wasn't sure what was going on, but something in his gut told him this wasn't a game. This wasn't the hide-and-seek he was used to. Where are we, Mariah? Dominic asked, his voice small and uncertain. I don't like it here. Mariah forced a smile, trying to comfort him, but it felt hollow. It's okay, Dominic. We're just going to stay here for a while, all right? I've got some cookies from Crimson Lights for you. She dug into her bag, pulling out a small tin of cookies she had bought earlier that day. Here, go wash your hands first, and we can have some cookies, okay? Dominic nodded reluctantly and turned toward the small bathroom at the back of the room. Mariah's eyes followed him for a moment before she leaned back against the wall, her mind racing with the gravity of the situation. She could hear the faint sound of the water running as Dominic washed his hands. It brought her back to a time when he was a little baby, when she would feed him, care for him, and sing him to sleep. Those memories seemed like a lifetime ago now. But then, something in the air shifted. A cold chill ran down her spine as a familiar voice echoed in her mind. The unmistakable, haunting voice of Ian Ward. "You've done it now, Mariah." Ian's voice whispered from the shadows, his presence almost tangible. "You've taken the child from his parents. That takes a lot of courage and strength. You should be proud." Mariah's breath caught in her throat. She turned, half expecting to see Ian's twisted face materialize from the shadows. But there was no one there, just the silence of the motel room, the sound of Dominic still in the bathroom. "I'm not proud," Mariah whispered aloud, the weight of her guilt pressing down on her. "I feel terrible." Ian's voice didn't relent, though. "Of course, you do. But you've done the right thing. You've protected him. You know what's best for him. And soon, you'll tell him that his parents don't want him anymore. It's the only way." Mariah shook her head, her hands trembling. She couldn't do it. She couldn't hurt him like that. But Ian's words had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. What if he was right? What if Dominic would be better off without them? What if? Just then, she heard the sound of Dominic's small footsteps approaching. He was back, his hands freshly washed. Mariah quickly wiped the tears from her eyes, forcing a smile as he re-entered the room. "Here you go," she said, handing him the cookies. "Now, let's sit down and eat." But even as she smiled at him, the weight of her decision hung over her like a dark cloud. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The truth was, she wasn't sure how long she could keep pretending that this was okay. And in the shadows of her mind, Ian's voice continued to echo. "You've done what needed to be done, Mariah. Now finish what you started." As the evening wore on, Mariah's guilt only deepened. She knew she was lying to Dominic, hiding the truth from him. But what other choice did she have? Could she really face the consequences of her actions? Could she ever undo the damage she had done? Somewhere far away, Abby and Devin were searching for their son. They didn't know where he was or who had taken him, but they would stop at nothing to get him back. And Mariah, sitting in the silence of the motel room, knew that time was running out. She couldn't keep running from the truth forever. Mariah's heart was heavy as she watched Dominic wash his hands in the small, dingy bathroom of the rundown motel. The sound of the water running felt distant, almost like it was happening in another world, far away from the chaotic and desperate situation she had gotten herself into. She stood in the dimly lit room, watching the shadows dance on the walls, lost in her thoughts. Every decision she had made in the last few days had led her to this moment. And now, as she stood in front of Dominic, trying to maintain a semblance of calm, she couldn't help but question everything. Dominic's voice broke through her inner turmoil as he called from the bathroom. "Mariah, can we go somewhere else? I don't want to stay here. It feels weird." Mariah quickly wiped the tears from her eyes, forcing a smile as she turned to face him. She had to be strong for him, for both of them. She couldn't let him see the cracks in her resolve. "We need to find a new place to hide, Bowie," she said, using the nickname she had affectionately given him when he was little. It was a nickname that now felt bittersweet, like a reminder of everything she was about to lose. Dominic, ever the curious and bright child, looked up at her with wide, questioning eyes. "But if we go too far, how will Mom and Dad find us?" he asked, his voice filled with concern, the innocence of his age making it all the more heartbreaking. Mariah knelt down, meeting his gaze, her hands resting gently on his small shoulders. "You'll like the end of this game, I promise," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "You trust me, don't you?" Dominic nodded enthusiastically, the trust in his eyes clear. "I trust you, Mariah." Mariah smiled, though it felt forced. She extended her hand to him, and without hesitation, He slapped his palm against hers in a playful high five, a moment of normalcy in an otherwise fractured world. "Let's go," she said, leading him back into the bedroom. As she gathered the cookies from Crimson Lights, she offered them to Dominic as a reward for his efforts, trying to keep the mood light. But as she watched him settle onto the bed and begin to eat, a knot tightened in her chest. She was lying to him. They weren't playing hide-and-seek anymore. She was running from the truth, from the life she had built, and from the people who had trusted her. Later, they began to play the game again. Dominic curled under a pile of blankets on the bed, giggling softly as he tried to hide. Mariah, though reluctant, joined in, the sound of their laughter briefly breaking through the heavy silence that had consumed her. When she found him, the joy in his eyes as he laughed made her heart ache. "You're really good at this," she said with a small smile. "I'm having so much fun," Dominic responded, his voice bubbling with happiness. "This is the best game ever, Mariah." Mariah's smile faltered as she brushed a strand of hair from his face. "I'm glad, Bowie. I'm glad you're happy," she whispered, though deep down, she knew the happiness was fleeting. She had no idea how much longer she could keep this up before the facade began to crumble. Meanwhile, across town, the atmosphere at the Chancellor estate was a far cry from the warmth it used to exude. The familiar walls now felt cold, distant, as Devin and Abby scoured the grounds in increasing desperation. "I don't understand where he could be," Abby said, her voice thick with panic as she moved from room to room, calling Dominic's name. "He wouldn't just run off like this, Devin. He wouldn't leave us." Devin's brow furrowed as he checked the backyard once again, his mind racing through every possible scenario. "Maybe he's just playing, Abby. Maybe he thinks it's some kind of game. We'll find him. We always do." Abby shook her head, disbelief in her eyes. "No, I know my son. He wouldn't do this to us. We've raised him better than that. Something's wrong. Something's happening. And I don't know what." Devin placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her as best as he could. "We've been over this, Abby. We're doing everything we can. Let's just keep looking. We'll find him. He's not far." But as they continued their search, the truth began to settle in. Dominic wasn't playing. He wasn't hiding. He was gone. After hours of searching the grounds with no sign of Dominic, the despair grew heavier in the air between them. Abby's hands trembled as she picked up a small, familiar towel that had been left behind near the garden gate. The cloth was damp, stained with something that didn't quite make sense. Devin looked at her, his face tense with worry. That looks like the towel from the sitter. Maybe she left it behind when she was watching him. Abby's heart skipped a beat. "No, Devin, we've never seen this before." Her voice dropped to a whisper, and she could feel the cold grip of fear taking hold of her. "Someone's been here." Devin's face paled as the realization hit them both. This wasn't an accident. Someone has taken him. The phone call came just as Abby's world seemed to be collapsing. The distorted voice on the other end of the line sent a chill through her spine, its tone dripping with malice. "Abby, Devin, your son is gone. Mariah took him. She's hiding him now, and you'll never see him again." Abby's breath hitched, her heart racing as the gravity of the situation became clear. "What? No, that's not possible. Mariah wouldn't do this. She wouldn't take him." The voice was cold, unmoved by her disbelief. "You've been fooled, Abby. She's not who you think she is. She took him because she thinks it's what's best. Now, you'll never find him." The line went dead. Abby dropped the phone, her legs giving out beneath her as the crushing weight of the reality set in. "Devin, she has him. Mariah, she's taken Dominic." Devin's face drained of color as he scrambled to compose himself. He immediately dialed the police, but Abby was no longer paying attention to the conversation. Her mind was a blur, and the only thing she could focus on was the terrifying thought of losing her son. Back at the motel, Mariah sat silently, watching Dominic as he played with his cookies, oblivious to the chaos unfolding outside. She couldn't stop thinking about the twisted path she had taken, and as the door clicked open, she turned to see Ian Ward's ghostly figure appear in the corner of the room. He stepped closer, his smile wide, eyes gleaming with that same dark approval. "I can't believe you, Mariah. You've really done it. You've taken a child from his parents. It takes a lot of guts, doesn't it?" Mariah recoiled slightly, her hands trembling. "I never wanted this, Ian. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I don't know what to do anymore." Ian's voice was like a snake, slithering into her ears, filling her mind with dangerous thoughts. "You need to do what's right, Mariah. You need to tell him that his parents don't want him anymore. That's the only way." Mariah's heart shattered at his words. She looked down at Dominic, who was smiling, blissfully unaware of the lies and manipulation that had brought him here. She didn't know how much longer she could keep this up, but as Ian's voice continued to whisper in her ear, she felt the weight of her decision bearing down on her. She had to keep him safe. She had to protect him, even if it meant destroying everything else in her life. With a heavy heart, Mariah turned away from Ian's spectral presence, her mind filled with the haunting certainty that there was no turning back now. She could only hope that, somehow, the damage she had caused could be undone. But deep down, she knew it was too late. The truth was out there, and sooner or later, it would come for them all. And when it did, Mariah knew there would be no escape.